Has someone you love started showing subtle but concerning changes over the past year? Many people assume that death in old age happens suddenly, but the truth is the body often sends quiet warnings months, sometimes even a year before life reaches its final stage. The problem is most people miss these signs because they seem small at first. It's only later, looking back, that families realize the clues were there all along, but by then, it's too late to prepare, too late to make those last memories count. Understanding these signs early gives you the opportunity to provide better care, cherish meaningful moments, and most importantly, ensure that your loved one's final stage of life is filled with comfort, dignity, and peace. Today, we're going to explore 5 key signs that often appear a year before an elderly person passes away. Some of these signs might be things you've noticed but brushed off as just aging. Others might be changes that seem minor, but actually signal the body's gradual decline. When you understand what's happening, you won't be caught off guard. You'll be able to make the most of the time you have left with those you love. Before we begin, I want to thank you for being here. If you find this discussion valuable, subscribe to Graceful Elderly, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement helps us continue bringing important and meaningful conversations to those who need them. Sign number 1. Unexplained weight loss. One of the earliest and most telling signs that a person may be approaching their final year of life is unintentional weight loss. At first, it might seem subtle: a belt that suddenly needs tightening, clothes that appear looser, or a once hearty appetite that begins to fade. Many families dismiss it as just part of getting older, but the truth is losing weight without trying is rarely a good sign. Weight loss in the elderly often indicates that the body is no longer absorbing nutrients efficiently. Muscle mass is decreasing and essential systems are slowing down. Aging naturally leads to some loss of muscle, but when it happens too quickly, it's a sign that something deeper is occurring. The body may be struggling to digest food properly, or may no longer be able to process protein effectively, leading to muscle wasting. This loss of strength doesn't just make movement more difficult, it increases the risk of falls, weakens the immune system, and leaves the person vulnerable to infections. Appetite changes also play a role. Many elderly individuals simply don't feel hungry the way they used to. Their sense of taste fades, food no longer seems enjoyable, and they might start skipping meals or eating much smaller portions. This isn't just a matter of preference, it's a physiological change. The body, sensing that it's beginning to shut down, no longer signals the brain to seek food as often. A third reason for weight loss in the final year of life is the progression of underlying medical conditions. Chronic diseases like cancer, heart failure, or kidney disease can begin advancing long before more obvious symptoms appear. Even conditions like depression or cognitive decline can lead to reduced eating, causing a downward spiral where the body isn't receiving enough fuel to sustain itself. Some families try to solve the problem by encouraging their loved ones to eat more, offering favorite foods or supplementing meals with protein drinks. But if the weight continues to drop despite these efforts, it's important to recognize that the issue is not just diet, it's the body preparing for a deeper transition. At this stage, forcing large meals may not help. Instead, focusing on comfort, easy-to-eat foods and hydration can make a bigger difference in maintaining quality of life. If you notice significant weight loss in an elderly loved one, especially if they're eating less, feeling weaker, or struggling to stay active, it's time to pay attention. This is not just about physical appearance, it's about the body sending a message, and understanding that message now can help you prepare for the road ahead with clarity, compassion, and the ability to make every remaining moment meaningful. In the next section, we'll explore another key sign: extreme fatigue and weakness. Many families mistake this for normal aging, but it often signals that the body is reserving its energy for essential functions. Stay with me, because this next warning sign is something most people overlook until it's too late. Extreme fatigue and weakness. When the body begins to conserve energy, one of the most noticeable changes in the final year of life is a deep, persistent fatigue that doesn't go away with rest. This isn't just feeling tired after a long day, it's a profound exhaustion that makes even the simplest tasks feel overwhelming. Getting out of bed becomes a challenge. Walking across the room requires effort, and activities that once felt routine, like cooking, dressing, or even holding a conversation, start to feel too draining. This isn't just a result of aging, it's a sign that the body is conserving its remaining energy. As organ function begins to slow, the body starts prioritizing what's most essential. The heart doesn't pump as efficiently, circulation weakens, and muscles don't get the same level of oxygen they once did. This is why many elderly individuals in their final months feel weak and steady and unable to sustain the same level of activity they once enjoyed. Another key factor is metabolic slowdown. The body is designed to produce and use energy, but as it prepares for its final phase, that energy is redirected. Instead of fueling movement, the body shifts toward preservation. This is why someone in decline may start sleeping more, needing longer naps during the day, and finding it harder to stay awake for long periods. Some may even experience sudden drops in energy where they seem fine one moment, but completely drained the next. Perhaps the most heartbreaking part of this process is the emotional impact of fatigue. Many seniors who once took pride in their independence begin feeling frustrated or even embarrassed that they can't do what they used to. They may withdraw from conversations, avoid social interactions, or stop engaging in hobbies, not because they don't care, but because they simply don't have the energy. This can lead to a cycle of isolation where they stop trying altogether, which only accelerates the decline. This was exactly what happened to Martha, a 78-year-old retired teacher. Martha had always been energetic. She loved gardening, going for walks with her friends, and attending her weekly book club. But over time, she noticed that she was struggling to keep up. She would start an activity, but quickly feel exhausted. She needed to sit down more often. Even simple household chores that she had done effortlessly for years now felt like monumental tasks. At first, she blamed it on getting older, but then she started skipping social events, telling people she just wasn't feeling up to it. Her world became smaller, her days quieter, and the more she withdrew, the more tired she felt. Her daughter, Julia, started noticing these changes and gently encouraged Martha to talk to her doctor. Tests showed no major illnesses, but the doctor explained that extreme fatigue is often a sign that the body is entering its final stage of life. It wasn't just about aging, it was about the body slowly preparing itself for a transition. Knowing this changed everything for Julia. Instead of pushing her mother to do more, she focused on making her remaining time more comfortable. She arranged for Martha to have more time sitting outside in the sun, brought her favorite books to read aloud, and instead of encouraging long outings, they spent quiet moments together at home. These small adjustments made Martha feel more at peace and even helped her find moments of joy, despite her limited energy. For families, watching a loved one go from active and engaged to exhausted and withdrawn can be painful. It's easy to assume they're just being lazy or that they need to push through it. But the reality is that forcing activity won't help. What matters most is understanding their limits, allowing them to rest when needed, and making their remaining days as comfortable as possible. Another important thing to recognize is that sudden fatigue can sometimes indicate an underlying issue, such as low oxygen levels due to heart or lung problems, anemia, or an undiagnosed infection. If your loved one is experiencing extreme weakness, it's important to monitor other symptoms such as dizziness, shortness of breath, or changes in skin color. If these signs appear, it may be worth consulting a doctor to determine whether any treatment could help ease their discomfort. Fatigue also affects cognitive function. When the body is exhausted, the brain struggles to stay sharp. This is why many seniors who experience deep fatigue also begin showing signs of confusion, memory lapses, or difficulty focusing. It's not that they are suddenly developing dementia, it's that their body doesn't have enough energy to maintain full cognitive function at all times. For caregivers, understanding this can help reduce frustration. Instead of correcting forgetfulness or confusion, It's more helpful to provide gentle reassurance, allowing them to take their time with conversations and reducing unnecessary stress. One of the most challenging aspects of extreme fatigue is that it often comes and goes. Some days your loved one might seem alert and active, while other days they barely have the energy to get out of bed. This unpredictability can be frustrating. For families who may feel a sense of false hope on good days, only to be discouraged when the fatigue returns, but recognizing that this is a natural part of the process can help you approach each day with patience and understanding. Tests also important to recognize that at this stage, energy conservation is key. If your loved one finds certain activities too exhausting, focus on adapting their environment instead of expecting them to come to the table for meals. Consider bringing food to them. Instead of long walks around the neighborhood, find a comfortable spot in the yard or by a window where they can still enjoy the outside world without exerting themselves. Small adjustments like these can make a world of difference in their comfort and quality of life. While extreme fatigue is one of the most obvious signs of decline, there is another major change that happens in the final months of life that is often overlooked: cognitive confusion and withdrawal. In the next section, we will explore how the brain begins to slow down, why seniors may become less engaged with those around them, and how families can navigate this difficult stage with patience and love. Many assume that memory loss in the final stage of life is the same as dementia, but the truth is there is something deeper happening in the brain that signals the body's transition. Stay with me as we discuss this next sign and how recognizing it early can help you better connect with and comfort your loved one in their final months. Cognitive confusion and withdrawal. When the mind begins to slow down, one of the most heartbreaking changes that occur in the final year of life is cognitive confusion and emotional withdrawal. At first, it may seem like simple forgetfulness, a misplaced item, a repeated question, a moment of distraction. But over time, it becomes clear that something deeper is happening. Your loved one may seem distant, lost in thought, or disconnected from conversations they once enjoyed. Many people assume that memory loss in old age is always a sign of dementia, but in reality, cognitive slowing is often a natural part of the body's preparation for the final stages of life. As energy levels decrease, the brain begins conserving resources, just as the body does. This means that tasks requiring focused memory and quick thinking become more difficult. Tone of the earliest signs of this change is a decline in attention span. Your loved one may struggle to follow along in conversations, seem uninterested in television or books they once enjoyed, or lose track of what they were saying mid-sentence. They may pause more often, take longer to respond, or seem confused. Even in familiar settings, these moments of cognitive fog may come and go, which can make it difficult for families to recognize them as part of a larger pattern. But over time, the frequency increases and the confusion becomes more noticeable. This is exactly what happened to Dorothy, a 76-year-old grandmother who had always been sharp and engaged with the world around her. She loved crossword puzzles, talking about current events, and keeping up with her grandchildren's lives. But in the past year, her family noticed subtle changes. She would forget plans she had made, she would lose track of conversations, and sometimes she would ask a question only to ask the same one 10 minutes later. At first, they chalked it up to normal aging, but as time went on, her moments of clarity became fewer, and she started withdrawing from family gatherings, sitting quietly instead of participating the way she once did. This kind of withdrawal is common as the brain begins to slow down in the final months of life. Social interactions, which once brought joy, can now feel exhausting for some seniors. It's because following conversations takes too much effort. For others, it's because they struggle to find the words they want to say. Rather than feeling embarrassed or frustrated, they simply choose to disengage. Many families misinterpret this withdrawal as depression or assume that their loved one is upset with them. But in reality, this is the mind's way of slowly letting go. As cognitive function declines, emotional expression also changes. You may notice that your loved one no longer reacts to news with the same enthusiasm. They may seem indifferent to things that once made them happy, or they may have difficulty expressing their emotions altogether. This doesn't mean they don't care, it means their brain is prioritizing essential functions over emotional engagement. One of the most challenging aspects of this stage is the unpredictability. Some days, they may seem perfectly fine engaging in conversation with clarity and ease. Other days, they may seem lost, struggling to focus, or responding with confusion. This can be difficult for families to process because it feels like they are losing their loved one in peace. Another common behavior during this stage is reminiscing. Many elderly individuals in their final year of life begin reflecting on the past far more than they focus on the present. They may bring up childhood memories, old friendships, or events from decades ago, while struggling to recall something that happened just yesterday. This is because long-term memories often remain intact, even as short-term memory fades. When this happens, it's important to engage with them in their memories, rather than correcting them if they are recalling a story slightly differently or mixing up details. Let them. It's not about accuracy, it's about comfort. This was something that Martha, a 79-year-old former school teacher, experienced in her final months. She would often sit quietly staring out the window, and when she did speak, she would talk about her childhood, about playing with her siblings in the summertime, or about the early days of her marriage. At first, her daughter would try to bring her back to the present, reminding her of what day it was or what was happening around her. But over time, she realized that these memories were where Martha found peace. Instead of forcing her into the present, she learned to sit with her in the past, asking gentle questions about her stories and letting her relive the moments that felt most vivid to her. One of the most difficult things for families during this stage is accepting that their loved one's cognitive abilities are declining, rather than fighting it or trying to correct their forgetfulness or confusion. It is far more comforting to meet them where they are. If they forget something important, don't get frustrated. Just gently remind them. If they seem lost in thought, don't try to force conversations. Simply sit with them and let them know they are not alone. Important thing to keep in mind is that while cognitive slowing is a natural part of the body's final transition, sudden or extreme confusion can sometimes indicate other medical issues such as infections, dehydration, or medication side effects. If a loved one experiences rapid disorientation, it is always worth checking with a doctor to rule out treatable conditions. Another key aspect of cognitive decline is changes in sleep patterns. Many elderly individuals in their final year of life begin sleeping more during the day and staying awake at odd hours at night. This is because the body's internal clock begins shifting, energy levels fluctuate, and they may experience more restlessness at bedtime or wake up frequently throughout the night. This stage can be especially difficult for caregivers who may feel helpless watching their loved one become more distant and detached. But it is important to remember that even as cognitive abilities fade, emotions remain. They may not always be able to express themselves the way they used to, but they still feel love, they still feel comfort, and they still need connection, even if it's as simple as holding their hand, sitting in silence with them, or playing their favorite music. Small moments of presence mean more than words ever could. While cognitive decline is one of the most profound signs that the body is preparing for its final transition, there is still one more major change that occurs in the last few months, and that is a shift in the body's physical needs. In the next section, we will explore why changes in eating, drinking, and body temperature signal that the body is entering its final stage. Many families struggle to understand these changes, but recognizing them can help provide comfort and ensure a peaceful transition for a loved one in their final moments. Changes in eating, drinking, and body temperature, the final transition. One of the most profound and often misunderstood signs that a loved one is nearing the end of their life is the shift in their physical needs, particularly in how they eat. Drink and regulate body temperature. These changes can be unsettling for families, especially when they realize that their once lively and independent loved one is no longer interested in food or begins to feel cold, even in a warm room. But understanding why these shifts happen can help provide comfort and ensure that their final days are filled with dignity rather than distress. And of the first physical changes many notice is a loss of appetite. Meals that were once enjoyed become unappealing. Portions become smaller, and eventually, there may come a time when your loved one refuses food altogether. For families, this can be heartbreaking. The instinct to nourish and provide care is strong, and watching someone reject food can feel like watching them slip away. But the truth is that in the final stages of life, the body no longer needs food the same way it once did. Digestion slows, energy demands decrease, and the body begins to focus only on its most essential functions. Forcing food at this stage can cause more discomfort than benefit. This was something Janet, a 75-year-old woman in hospice care, experienced. Her daughter Sarah tried everything to encourage her to eat. She prepared her favorite meals, made nutrient-rich smoothies, even bought her supplements, but Janet simply wasn't interested. At first, Sarah felt like she was failing as a caregiver. She worried that if her mother wasn't eating, she would only weaken faster. But after speaking with the hospice nurse, she learned that at this stage, eating isn't about survival anymore. It's about comfort. When the body is preparing to shut down, digestion slows. Forcing food can lead to nausea, discomfort, and bloating, making things harder rather than help. Instead of focusing on meals, families can shift to small offerings that provide comfort without forcing the body to process more than it can handle. A spoonful of pudding, a sip of juice, a piece of chocolate. Sometimes it's not about nutrition, but about the pleasure of taste. Allowing a loved one to have what they enjoy in small amounts can bring them more comfort than any well-balanced meal ever could. Along with reduced appetite comes a decrease in thirst. Many notice that their loved one drinks far less than they used to, sometimes refusing water altogether. Again, this is a natural part of the body's transition. As organ function slows down, the need for hydration decreases. The kidneys are no longer filtering as much fluid. The body is no longer expelling waste. The metabolism is at its lowest point. Hydration at this stage is about keeping the mouth moist and comfortable rather than forcing unnecessary intake. Many families worry about dehydration at this stage, believing that if their loved one stops drinking, it will speed up their passing. While dehydration can be dangerous in earlier stages of life, in the final days, it is not what causes discomfort. What does cause discomfort is forcing fluids when the body is no longer processing them properly. This can lead to bloating, coughing, or even difficulty breathing as fluids accumulate instead of being absorbed. This was something James, a 79-year-old father of 3, experienced. His family was deeply concerned when he stopped drinking water. They brought him ice chips, encouraged sips of tea, and even tried feeding him broth. But he kept turning away. Eventually, his hospice nurse explained that rather than forcing fluids, using lip balm, offering ice chips, or moistening his mouth with a damp cloth would be more beneficial. Once his family shifted their focus from hydration to comfort, they saw that James seemed more at peace rather than struggling to meet expectations that his body could no longer fulfill. Another major physical change that signals the body's transition is a shift in body temperature regulation. Many people nearing the end of life feel cold, even in warm rooms. This happens because circulation begins to slow down. Blood is no longer flowing as efficiently to the hands, feet, and extremities. Instead, it is being redirected to the most vital organs. This is why many people notice their loved ones' hands and feet becoming cold or even turning slightly blue. This change can be difficult to witness, but it is not painful for the person experiencing it. Keeping them warm with soft blankets, warm socks, or gentle heating pads can bring comfort. But it's important not to overheat them, as their body is less able to regulate temperature. Sudden overheating can cause more distress than the cold itself. Families often instinctively want to pile on blankets, but checking to see if their loved one feels comfortable first is important. As the body continues its transition, another common change is irregular breathing patterns. This can be one of the hardest things for families to witness. A loved one who once breathed steadily and predictably may begin experiencing long pauses between breaths or shallow breathing. At times, this is known as Cheyne-Stokes breathing. And while it may seem alarming, it is not painful. It is simply the body's way of adjusting to its final phase of function. This was something Ruth, an 82-year-old mother of 4, experienced in her final days. Her children sat by her bedside watching as her breathing slowed and then stopped for long moments before starting again. They were terrified each time, wondering if she had passed, but her hospice nurse reassured them that this was a natural part of the body's transition, rather than a distressing event. Ruth was not in pain. Her body was simply taking its final steps toward rest. For families witnessing these changes, it is easy to feel helpless. But the most important thing to remember is that presence is what matters most. Sitting beside them, holding their hand, playing their favorite music, or simply being there in silence provides comfort in ways that words never could. In these final days and hours, it is not about doing more. It is about being there when a loved one enters this stage. It is time to let go of expectations and focus on what truly matters, providing love, comfort, and reassurance. Many people worry about saying the right thing, but sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is simply, "I'm here, and I love you." Final moments are often quieter than families expect. Many assume that there will be dramatic last words or clear signs that the end is near, but more often than not, it is a slow, gentle fading. A loved one may become less responsive, sleep more, and eventually slip away in a peaceful stillness. One of the hardest truths about the final year of life is that no matter how much we prepare, it never feels like enough. But recognizing these signs early allows families to cherish the time they have left to say what needs to be said to bring comfort. Instead of first journey toward the end of life is not just about loss, it is about love. It is about presence. It is about making sure that the final chapter is written with dignity and peace. For those who recognize these signs in their loved ones, know that you are not alone. You have the power to make this time meaningful, to provide the care, the comfort, and the love that truly matters in the end.